Right now, somewhere in the world, a child is kicking a ball. Not because anyone told them to, not because they saw it on television, not because their parents signed them up for a class. They just found a ball, and they kicked it. That instinct, that ancient, deeply human instinct to strike a round object with your foot, feels so natural, so obvious, so woven into the fabric of who we are, that you probably never stop to ask the question, what if it never happened? What if football, the most watched, most played, most argued about sport in the history of human civilization, simply never existed? The real answer is far stranger than you think. Because football didn't just give us a game, it gave us an identity, a language, a reason to feel things so deeply that grown adults weep in the streets. It built cities, it started wars, it ended them too. And when you start pulling on that thread, when you ask what the world looks like without it, everything unravels in ways you never expected. Let's go back, way back. The year is 1863, London, England. A group of men in a cold room are arguing about rules. Specifically, they are arguing about whether you should be allowed to pick up the ball and run with it. This argument, this single, petty, passionate argument, is the moment that splits sport in two. The men who want to carry the ball leave and eventually form rugby. The men who insist you use only your feet stay and write down 13 simple rules. They call their new organization the Football Association. And from that cold room, an empire is born. But here is the thing about football. It did not appear from nowhere in 1863. Humans have been kicking balls for thousands of years. The ancient Chinese played a game called kuju, which translates simply to kickball, as far back as 300 BC. The ancient Greeks had a version. The Romans played one too, and carried it with them across Europe as their empire expanded. The instinct was always there. 1863 just gave it a name, a structure, and a set of rules that the whole world could eventually agree on. So what if those 13 men never met? What if that argument never happened? Here is where it gets strange. Without organized football, the working class of Victorian England loses its release valve. Because that is exactly what football was in its early years. A release valve. A pressure valve for the industrial age. Men who worked 14-hour days in factories and mines and shipyards needed somewhere to put their frustration, their energy, their desperate need to belong to something larger than themselves. Football gave them that. Historians who study sport and society, people like David Goldblatt, whose book, The Ball is Round, remains the definitive history of football, argue that organized sport in the late 19th century was one of the primary forces that prevented widespread civil unrest in industrial Europe. Think about that for a moment. Football, a game, may have helped prevent revolutions. Without it, that energy goes somewhere else. Where? Nobody knows for certain. But history gives us clues. The same period that saw football explode across Europe also saw the rise of labor movements, political radicalism, and social unrest. Football did not eliminate those forces, but it absorbed some of them, channeled them into something that felt meaningful without being dangerous. Remove football, and you remove that channel. Now let us travel further. Because football did not stay in England. It spread. And the way it spread tells you everything about what the world would look like without it. Football followed the British Empire. Sailors brought it to ports. Engineers brought it to the railways they were building across South America. Merchants brought it to the docks of West Africa. Teachers brought it to schools across Asia. By the time the 20th century arrived, football was already the most global game ever played. Not because FIFA forced it on anyone, not because of television deals or sponsorship money, but because every single culture that encountered it looked at those 13 simple rules and thought, yes, this is ours now. That universality is the key. Football works across every language, every culture, every economic class because it requires almost nothing. A ball, a space, 2 makeshift goals. You can play it in the streets of Cairo or the favelas of Rio or the dusty plains of rural Kenya. The barrier to entry is essentially zero. Without football, what fills that space? Some other sport, perhaps. Cricket was already global by the 19th century, but it was slower, more complex, more colonial in its culture. Basketball emerged in 1891, just decades after football, and spread rapidly. But it requires a hard surface, a hoop, infrastructure. It never penetrated the same depth of poverty that football did. The truth is, nothing replaces football. Not cleanly, not completely. And that absence is felt most in the places where football means the most. Consider Brazil, a country whose entire national identity is bound up in the beautiful game. Brazil without football is not simply Brazil without a sport. It is Brazil without Pelé, without samba football, without the 1970 World Cup team that many still consider the greatest collection of footballers ever assembled, without the national myth that says, whoever you are, wherever you come from, if you can play, you can make it. That myth matters. It is not always true, but it matters. It tells millions of children in poverty that the world is not entirely closed to them. Remove football, and you remove that myth. Consider Africa, a continent that has used football as one of its primary cultural exports to the world. Players from Nigeria, Senegal, Ghana, Ivory Coast, Egypt, they have used football as a bridge, a way to move, to be seen, to be celebrated in countries that might otherwise ignore them entirely. Football gave them visibility. It gave their nations pride. It gave ordinary families a son who played in Europe and sent money home. Without football, that bridge does not exist. And then there is the World Cup itself. Every 4 years, the entire planet pauses. Not for a political summit, not for a scientific breakthrough, not for a royal wedding or a state funeral, for a football tournament. 195 countries, billions of people, watching the same event at the same time, feeling the same emotions, the joy, the heartbreak, the fury, the disbelief, simultaneously across every language and time zone and cultural barrier on Earth. There is nothing else like it. Nothing even close. The Olympic Games come closest. But the Olympics is dozens of sports competing for attention. The World Cup is one. One game, one trophy, one story unfolding in real time across the entire world. Without football, that shared experience does not exist. And shared experience matters more than people realize. Psychologists who study group identity, researchers like Henry Tajfel, who developed social identity theory, found that humans define themselves largely through the groups they belong to. Football provides one of the most powerful group identities available. It does not care about your politics or your religion or your income. It asks only one question. Which team do you support? That question connects strangers. It gives people something to talk about, to argue about, to celebrate together in every airport lounge and office canteen and street corner on Earth. Remove that question, and you remove millions of invisible threads that hold communities together. There is one more thing worth considering. Football has produced some of the most extraordinary human performances ever witnessed. Moments so beautiful, so improbable, so perfectly constructed that they feel less like sport and more like art. Maradona's goal against England in 1986. 11 seconds, 11 touches. The greatest individual goal ever scored in the most politically charged match in World Cup history. Zinedine Zidane gliding through defenses with a grace that seemed to belong to a different species. Ronaldo, Messi, Ronaldinho, humans performing at the absolute limit of what the human body and mind can do together. These moments are not just sporting achievements, they are part of the cultural inheritance of our species. They are talked about the way great paintings are talked about, the way great music is talked about. Without football, they never happen. And the world, quietly, invisibly, in ways most people never think about, is smaller for it. So here you are, reading this, probably able to name a player, a team, a moment that meant something to you, a game you watched that you still remember, a goal that made you feel something you could not put into words. That feeling is not trivial. That feeling is evidence of something profound. That sport, at its best, makes us more human, more connected, more alive. Football did not just give us a game, it gave us each other. And the next time you see a child kick a ball, anywhere, remember that this small, instinctive, ancient act is one of the things holding the whole world together.